As populations change, so does the profile of needs to be addressed by philanthropy. That should also mean a different map for connections between donors and people served. Working on that project currently is the nonprofit New England Blacks in Philanthropy. We'd like to welcome its CEO and president, Bithia Carter. Thank you much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
What I just said could be said about a lot of places in this country right now, but what about Boston? Why is it so important to work on this right now?
Well, you know, Boston for a very long time was seen as kind of a Yankee city, right? A city that was kind of stern, it was kind of insular, and it was kind of, everything was homegrown. Boston has changed over the many years. The transient population has increased tremendously. We have new Americans that are here from various countries, so we really have become a more diverse place. And with that diversity, it's not just the diversity of need that we're looking at, but the diversity of assets that are coming here as well. Too often, when we think of populations, particularly populations of color, we see them in a certain light. We see their deficits. We don't see all of the wonderful things that they bring. We don't see the assets that they bring to a town or a city like Boston. And that's the work that we're hoping to do here, to highlight the assets, the new assets in particular of our city, and ensuring that that asset is used for our common good.
Assets can mean many things, but when I think of philanthropy, I think of someone who's wealthy. You know a lot more about this than I do, so you're not just thinking about the wealthy, I assume, right?
No, I'm not. I'm thinking of everyone. Philanthropy is time, talent, and treasure. And we do know that for the most part, it's the everyday philanthropist that really influences the town or influences a city, that influences politics, that everyday philanthropist is the person that actually elects people. So when we think of the large philanthropists, you know, when people tend to think of Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Oprah, yes, they may exist, but it's really that small engine of everyday philanthropists that keeps the engine of philanthropy running.
One of the things you're doing is you're putting out a questionnaire, and I guess to start with, one of the things you want to find out about is what people's priorities are, right?
I do, because what we have not done very well in the past have asked people, what do you think? Where are you giving? Why do you give there? What is influencing you? I think, you know, we make some assumptions that people give to either church, or they give to Little League, or they give to something that's very close and near and dear to them. What we've not asked, what motivates you? What trends are you seeing? Where would you like to give? And I don't even know, for you, Chris, for example, I don't know the last time you were asked about your own philanthropic giving. So we're missing out on a lot of information about the engine that is really running our society.
Well, there are some big names in philanthropic giving. They're supposed to take care of everybody, but one thing that's not new, I know you're working with the Black philanthropy, but at the same time, you know, we've always had these organizations. It could be Chinese or Irish or Jewish. I mean, you know, there's always been that sort of dedicated giving too.
There's been dedicated giving since the beginning of time, right? But we've done a poor job of cataloging that. We've done a very poor job of asking people to share their stories and asking them to inspire others. Too often their gifts are not seen and not recognized. You know, we were aware of a few years that many people have said, you know, Boston is not a giving town. And we have found quite the opposite. And so not only do we want to highlight that giving, we want to use it to inspire others. So our Giving Boston report is a comparative analysis between Black, Latino, Asian, and white giving. We want to understand, how does the LGBTQ community give? How does that cut along sectors such as race? How does that cut along sectors such as income? What does it mean to be a giver here in Boston? And use that as a way of better understanding each other, but also elevating who we are, the trueness of our character here in Boston.
Well, one thing I noticed in the questionnaire is that we don't give money to demographic groups. We give money to networks, organizations, or maybe something with an agenda, like a faith group perhaps. So you're asking people about things like that, aren't you?
I am asking people about things like that, but I'm also asking about their affinities. I'm asking, I think people give from where their heart sits. So sometimes that is an affinity. That could be Combined Jewish Philanthropies. That could be the Irish Fund. That could be the NAACP or the Urban League. And they have a particular affinity. But we also know that people give across affinities as well. We want to understand not only what motivates them, but how do you see yourself linked to those other affinities? Because ultimately, philanthropy should be about how we are improving our city writ large, not just your particular sect or your particular group, but what is the vision that we're holding forth? And then how are we funding that vision?
This is BNN News. We're talking with Bithia Carter from New England Blacks in Philanthropy. Bithia, you've also done some work like this in other cities. Maybe you're further down the road in at least one of them. What have you found?
Well, our first city was actually our home, Boston. About 3 years ago, we created our first report, Giving Black Boston. And it was fascinating. We learned not only a treasure of information about donors here, but it inspired other donors across the country to ask, what do we know about our own cities? When we shared this work, we were fortunate enough to have this work funded by W.K. Kellogg, who's been doing this work for more than 20 years to understand how do we catalyze giving among communities of color. And that was necessary work. They started it in the 90s, and it was necessary because although people of color were giving, it was not acknowledged. If it's not acknowledged, then it doesn't exist. So therefore, the face of giving looks like you, and the face of need starts to look like me. And anything that did not fit that was not seen and not visible. And W.K. Kellogg said, this isn't right. We know people are giving in communities of color. We know that they're giving more of their share in communities of color when it comes to their income. So they started this work in the 90s, and we were very fortunate in 2014 to be part of a cohort of catalyzing community giving. And from that cohort, not only did we learn about what our sister organizations were doing around the country, but it also focused us here in our hometown to better understand affinity giving. And when the report was done, I think it really motivated other people to say, hey, what's going on in my community? Whether it's the Latino community, whether it is the Asian community, or even the white community. What is really going on? Too often, as you said earlier, the big names are often noted in philanthropy. We know those names. What we don't see is the everyday giver, like you and so many others, and understand what motivates and trends that they're following as well. So once we completed our report in 2015, we were very fortunate to be called by the Community Foundation in Cincinnati, and they too wanted to understand their giving as well. So as Greater Cincinnati Community Foundation came together with their donors, we were able to complete a report in this past December of 2018. And I believe that this work is starting to catch fire because we know that this philanthropy is about engaging all of us, not some of us. And we also need to lean in on each other's assets and each other's ability to ensure that we have viable communities going forward.
We should mention that if people want to contribute to the research and find out more about what you're doing, there's a way online they can check that out.
And it's very simple, givingboston.org. We hope that you not only check it out, but we hope that you participate in the survey as well.
Thank you very much for being with us. Bithia Carter from New England Blacks in Philanthropy.